from the unions.
If I could just interrupt, we have a breaking news now, and that's this, and that's the Treasury Minister, Tulip Siddiq, has left the government.
Yeah.
Number 10 has just announced, just to repeat, breaking news.
Yeah.
The under fire Treasury Minister, Tulip Siddiq, has left the government. Number 10 has just said, Dame Harriet Baldwin there is nodding along saying yes. This must come as no surprise to you.
She had to go. She wasn't there this afternoon sitting by the Chancellor's side, and all the other Treasury Ministers were. She's now being investigated for a second corruption investigation by the Bangladeshi government. And, you know, clearly the situation was untenable. She'd been given these flats in London. No one could quite understand why, but it was obviously to do with her closeness to the outgoing Bangladeshi government. So it was clearly an untenable situation.
And when you become the story for this many days in a row, it simply becomes too much noise, right? She had to go in the end.
She certainly did, and to have her in the role of anti-corruption minister just made us a laughingstock around the world. So, yeah, she had to go.
And this will trigger a by-election, will it? And that's in the neighbouring seat?
No, it will trigger a reshuffle.
Okay.
A reshuffle. So she's not resigning as an MP.
Why not?
She's resigning as a minister.
Well, surely, if she's been found wanting in terms of a minister, why does that not extend to her role as parliamentarian full stop?
Well, that would be a choice she would make. But also, I think the rules on a recall of MPs does take some time, and you have to have been convicted of something before they can start a recall in your constituency. So that would be more of a slow burn. But she had to go as a minister, and I'm glad to hear that she has. OK,
so just to repeat there, Treasury Minister, under fire Treasury Minister Tulip Siddiq there, Labour Party has left the government. Number 10 has just said, that's just a breaking news line. No great surprises. And Dame Harriet Baldwin there, not at all surprised by that. Can I ask you, Dame Harriet, about a poll that's out in today's press, putting the Reform Party now as the official opposition. Even Sky News saying this is launching what they call the dawn of a new British political era. Labour Party has lost 9 percentile points since the general election. The Conservative has slipped 2. Reform have put on 10% since July, now putting them on 25%. Labour 26, Conservatives 22. Do you think there's a huge problem with the Conservatives? You're simply being outflanked by Nigel Farage.
Well, I certainly think that it's important that we, as His Majesty's official opposition in Parliament, hold the Labour Party's feet to the fire day in, day out. We are ruled by socialists. We've got to stand up and oppose the measures that they're taking that are being so harmful, as you've just outlined, to the UK economy. So we will do our job diligently as His Majesty's opposition. Obviously, it's a long way until there's another general election. We've got to earn back the trust of the British public over that period.
Do you think you picked the wrong leader? Kemi Badenoch has lost 2 percentage points since the general election. Doesn't seem to be getting the cut through.
No, I fully support what Kemi is doing. The party in Parliament is completely united behind her leadership, and we must continue to hold, you know, what is the real damage to this country is around the Labour government and the socialist government that we're experiencing, and we must hold their feet to the fire, and I think Kemi is doing a fantastic job doing that as well. Thank
you for joining us today in the studio. Dame Harriet Baldwin MP for West Worcestershire. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. Let's cross straight now to GB News political editor Chris Hope on that breaking news. Tulip Siddiq been forced out, resigned. Chris Hope, all the latest in a day of political drama. Tell us more.
That's right, I've just left the briefing now with number 10 Downing Street. It was 25 minutes late, in part because we had the Iraqi Prime Minister here, but also clearly there's lots of movement in the building behind me. Tulip Siddiq has left the government. Of course, she's been investigated by Laurie Magnus. He's the independent advisor on ministerial standards, self-referred to him. With the review has been ongoing. Sir Laurie has confirmed, according to Tulip Siddiq, that she has not breached the ministerial code. However, she has gone because she recognises that her role as Economic Secretary of the Treasury is likely to be a distraction from the work of government. Her loyalty is with the Prime Minister and the Labour government. Emma Reynolds, a former minister in Tony Blair's government, is now taking her place in government. Torsten Bell recently joined as an MP in July. He's made a quick move into the government. He is now a junior Treasury Minister and a Minister in the Department of Work and Pensions. So it is all happening here in Downing Street, while focus has been on Rachel Reeves and her future as Chancellor, which the PM Sir Keir Starmer took 4 hours yesterday to say she'll be there for the full term of a Labour government. We now have Tulip Siddiq resigning from the government. It's related to properties she's been gifted. The change of government in Bangladesh. Her aunt had a key role in the government there, and there's been lots of reports over the weekend about numbers of properties she's been able to take advantage of. It clearly became a distraction of the government, in Tulip Siddiq's own words, and she has now quit.
Chris Hope, can I ask you about what they call a dead cat in politics? All of the eyes were on Rachel Reeves. She was massively under fire in Parliament today. She was under fire for being in China, for what's happening on the economy. And suddenly everyone's talking about Tulip Siddiq. Am I being a cynic, or was actually the writing on the wall for Tulip Siddiq because of her own affairs?
I think the latter. There was reports today in the Financial Times breaking at lunchtime of a second investigation of some sort by the Bangladeshi government. Of course, she already referred herself over this here. She's a key ally of Sir Keir Starmer. Sir Keir Starmer knows her locally in his Holborn and St Pancras constituency, their neighbouring MPs. He has got on well with her, and I think it's a blow to him. There's lots of personal loyalty with Tulip Siddiq, but I think she couldn't really carry on with this role. It does cover areas, of course, that Tulip Siddiq says she's no problem here, but it does look at the area of anti-corruption, and that would have been a distraction for her. She wasn't allowed or able to go to China with Rachel Reeves at the weekend. She was benched for that trip, and that, as soon as you start being unable to carry out part of your job because of other things happening in your life as an MP and a minister, then I think the writing's on the wall. And we were told, I was understood earlier from Number 10 sources, that there'll be an imminent decision by Laurie Magnus. We were expecting him to make his announcement, and then that was a scoping exercise and then a full investigation. Well, she's gone before that even happened. But according to Tulip Siddiq, of course, she was given the clean bill of health by Laurie Magnus.
Thank you there, Chris Hope. That's the breaking news. Tulip Siddiq, the anti-corruption minister, resigns following allegations of corruption. Just another day in Westminster. Chris Hope, thank you very, very much for joining us on GB News. Now then, we can speak with the barrister and the writer Stephen Barrett. Welcome to the show, Stephen. Can I get your take quickly on the situation around Tulip Siddiq? Astonishing, is it not, that an anti-corruption minister seems to have been forced into resignation because of allegations of corruption?
It took far too long. You know, we've known about this story for days, and Starmer has done nothing. In fact, we're told that she resigned. So we're not even told that he sacked her. He didn't even have the courage to sack her. There's a report out that she didn't breach the ministerial code. Now, that seems to me, Martin, to be the very definition of jumping the gun, because I think we should discover what the Bangladeshi authorities uncover. You know, in the great spirit of let's just wait a while and see what comes out. But the idea that she could have stayed as anti-corruption minister in these circumstances is simply absurd. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, forced Boris Johnson out over a lawful piece of cake. This is so much more serious. Yet we all of us seem to be mentally conditioned to live in a world in which there are no consequences for the left wing. Well, that is not the rule of law, Martin. And it's not very good for our society. It's not healthy for our society. I have many friends on the left, and I want them all held to the same rules we're all held to. That's the most important thing, that we live in a proper democratic country under the rule of law. And the idea that Tulip Siddiq could have ridden this out was absurd. But it was absurd on Friday, it was absurd on Thursday, it was absurd last week. You know, this is the idea that we get to Tuesday before finally something happens. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Here we are. This is the government, and 2 ministers in less than 6 months. The Chancellor teetering on the edge. I mean, this government is in a terrible position.
Stephen Barrett, we were told that this kind of politics would be over with the Labour Party coming in. We were told that cronyism, corruption, free specs, free suits, jobs for the boys, jobs for the girls. We were told that would be over. The adults are back in the room. This casts a magnifying glass over that credibility, doesn't it?
It does. And to be fair to this government, the preceding Tory government tried exactly the same rhetoric. And basically, they're both failing for exactly the same reason. One is that they seem to be full of people who aren't actually very decent and honest. And I think we need to talk about who we are recruiting as our politicians, whether we have people of genuine substance or whether we have people that, frankly, you wouldn't trust with your kids. And then we need to ask, what are our politicians actually doing? Because as far as I can tell, all this government does is what the civil service wants it to do. Well, the civil service is not full of the most talented people in our country either, Martin. And I don't believe the civil service knows what it's doing. And the Rishi Sunak government largely followed what the civil service wanted to do. And that didn't work out either. So this government, I think, is failing for exactly the same reasons and isn't going to improve.
OK, Stephen Barrett, we have to leave it there. Always a pleasure, never a chore. Thank you very, very much. Plenty more coming up on this breaking news story. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. All reaction to the resignation of Tulip Siddiq. I'm now joined by the political commentator Benedict Spence. Benedict, welcome to the show. Am I alone in revelling in the abject absurdity of the fact that the anti-corruption minister has been forced to resign around allegations of corruption?
No, I'm glad that you picked up on this. It is fundamentally very funny. It shows that humour in British politics and British life is not dead, and that our politicians will happily walk into these living, breathing jokes of their own volition. So I'm very happy to see that she was the first one to win the sack race. The first of many, I assume, because it's not looking good for Labour just all round. I mean, and this case was particularly absurd. It is, as Stephen Barrett was saying earlier, it was not as if the ties between Tulip Siddiq and the government of Bangladesh, the former government of Bangladesh, were not very well known, and that the chicanery around much of what the former government of Bangladesh used to get up to was very well known. The extent to which Tulip Siddiq might have benefited from that perhaps was slightly less well known. However, it was very clear, given what was being investigated, that this was not somebody who should have been appointed to a cabinet position, let alone made the government's own anti-corruption czar. Unless, of course, they were thinking something along the lines of, well, maybe she's got some sort of inside track on this sort of thing, as a practical joke. It's obviously... it's funny, but it's also very depressing. It's very depressing, actually, that the government, that Keir Starmer thought that this appointment could be made and that absolutely nothing untoward would come of it, and that this would just sort of pass off without a hitch and that nobody would notice. One sort of gets the impression that this government operates on the basis that they can just do what they want and that the rest of the world won't notice what goes on inside. And we're seeing that played out not just in the case of Tulip Siddiq, but in the case of the literal economy falling about its ears.
Benedict Spence, isn't the broader point that we were told this kind of politics would be over? No more cronyism, no more corruption, no more bad old ways, a fresh dawn of political cleanliness, as pure as the driven snow. Yet here we are, so few months in, the anti-corruption minister gets the heave-ho because of corruption.
Of course. We were promised that the adults would be back in charge. And, it took, to be fair, all of about a month before riots broke out across the country at the inability of the adults to get a grip on the situation. But, I mean, I think it would have been foolish for any of us to buy into the spin that Labour were giving us. They haven't really changed. And as somebody actually I saw put on Twitter earlier, that they've never known a socialist government that wasn't corrupt at some point because it's sort of part of the DNA. This is the sort of thing that does happen, is that people fall into these situations because they can't help themselves. Politics attracts those kind of people. Lots of good people in politics, but also lots of people who frankly should be nowhere near it. That is the nature of it. Well, what I would say is it's a good thing that we're finding these things out nice and early in the administration. It's not like we've got 4.5 years left of this.
It's simply astonishing. And as you say, could this be the first of many? Rachel Reeves herself was getting a serious amount of fire in Parliament earlier on. And here we go. A dead cat's been thrown out. Pardon my cynicism. Tulip Siddiq is the one who's garnering the headlines today. Benedict Spence, and always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much there to react into that astonishing news that the government's anti-corruption czar has been forced to resign over allegations of corruption. Just another mad day in the world of Westminster.